Okay, today we will discuss about Springboot. What is a Springboot? What is the purpose of Springboot? How it helps the developers and where we are using this Springboot and the ways to create a Springboot project. Okay. Let's start with theoretical part first to understand what is a Springboot. Basically, Springboot it is extension of the Spring framework. It is also a open source Java based framework. Everything we are talking about Java only here, it is a Java based framework. Why it is required means it helps the developers. It provides a quick and easy way to create our standalone production grade applications. As told you, it is the extension means it is built on the top of existing Spring framework and provides with a rich features that makes our application easily means that help us to develop applications quite fast, which means it gives us an easier way to set up, configure and run our applications. Which means if we think about that earlier traditional approach of Spring framework, we have a lot of annotations out there, but however, that is everything is used by XML, which means using XML configuration, we have to develop our code. But that make a lot of code changes is required to start a Spring framework application. Also to create a Spring framework application, also you have to create a Marvin project, you have to create XML file, you have to create a beans and to auto wire that, to inject that beans, to populate the default values, everything you have to write. Say code is very complex. Again, it takes a lot of time to do all this stuff, to run the application, also to test, to do a small test of application. Also everything is XML based. Lot of developer code is wasted here. With Springboot, it eliminates all this heavy lifting of configuration that is required to set up our Spring applications. Instead of doing all these things, developer can just focus on what code he has to write, means on the business logic. Within a few clicks, we can start this Springboot application. Means within a few clicks, with less time, we can create a project and run the project. Here we don't have any XML based configurations, completely annotation based only. You ever seen that there is a XML file that is required here? Why? You can ask without any configuration how this works. That is the magic of Springboot. Internally, it comes with a built-in libraries. What is required for the Java applications to run and what is required to implement a web applications, and what functionalities we are expecting to implement or develop our pipe. Everything is built in. All these are built in classes and interfaces, means all these libraries are already available in the Springboot. So with the help of that, this Springboot automatically create the configurations and classes, any databases, XML population or reading values from the external sources, so on, whatever you do, you can do anything. Even you can have a listeners also in the Springboot. So number of features are there that we will see step by step what features this Springboot supports. Now, here's we'll first discuss about the key benefits to developers. Here are the list of key benefits to the developers, like auto configuration. What do you mean by auto configuration? The moment you start the Springboot application, right, something has to be configured. Means some configuration is required to your Springboot application, right? That we usually write that manually in the traditional Spring framework, but this There is auto configuration concept called @SpringBoot application, and other auto configuration annotations are there, and configuration source, and there are many annotations there which help us to create the configurations automatically. By default, SpringBoot loads the entire configuration what it supports as a part of Spring Boot framework. You no need to write a single piece of configuration related stuff. If you want to have a custom configuration, and if you have a custom classes where you are implementing like a security, JDBC template, and reading a properties from external sources, right? So then you can customize your configurations. Right? Until then, Spring Boot automatically provides everything for you. That is called as a auto configuration, which means here, even if you go for customization, so there are a lot of things that still you rely on the Spring Boot framework. It reduces the amount of boilerplate code that developer need to write all these things. That is called as auto configurations, which means it automatically configures everything that your application needs. First thing is embedded. Next is embedded server. In general, to run any web-based applications, you have to deploy the applications in that web server, not application server, what I meant. So that first, for that again, we have to configure that Tomcat server or WebLogic, whatever the servers available. And you have to give a configuration to configure the database details and map that JNDA to your project, so that your application connects to that server and read that database details using JNDA. So this also not required using Spring Boot. Spring Boot automatically comes with the embedded server. What is embedded servers means? It is as a part of Spring Boot dependency. It's a part of web dependency, which allows the developer to easily create and deploy application without any need for an external web server. You no need to worry about that. Once you are done with the development, okay, you just run as web application. That a Spring Boot automatically have this embedded server, and it comes with the default port as 8080. Later, if you want to have a different port number, if you want to change the port number, you can go ahead according to your port number. Sometimes it is some server is already running with that particular port number, default port number 8080. So it will be conflict that saying that port address are already bind or address already in use. So such scenario, you can have that different port numbers. So this embedded server, you cannot see in live that. You cannot see that how we external Tomcat we see, right? That we cannot see this embedded server. It is inside the Spring Boot application. When you start the application, it automatically invoke that web server as a default server that it supports, and automatically runs with the default port. If you override that server.port in some application.properties, then it will override with the default port with the supplied port. So this embedded servicing embedded server, you can run your program without any configuring the external web servers. Next thing is you can easily set up that. What is set up that? We see if you start the Spring Boot applications, right, to test that with minimum configuration, we need to have the minimum configuration. To do that minimum configuration, you don't need to worry that. You just leave that to Spring Boot only, right? If you know the annotations of Spring Boot, what each of these annotation is doing, then you can easily create and configure a Spring based application with minimal configuration, which means you don't need to write a lengthy or complex code in that. You just write a minimal configuration. You are responsible to do a minimum configuration stuff. The Spring Boot automatically do everything for us. Before that, you have to understand the annotations. How many annotations are there? What each of these annotation is doing for us. If you are clear with the annotations, then only you can play with that annotations. How this is working, you have to understand. Using placing the annotations somewhere just like that, not it. Using annotations also should be the right way. You cannot just use something annotations, so this also doing that way, that's also doing the same job. But however, there are certain annotations do the same job, but to have a clear understanding, we have to use that particular annotations at that layer level. That I will explain you during hands-on, no worry. Next is robot testing support. If you think about that, our testing part is, as a developer, once we are done with the coding, we have to test this application. We have to test our code, what we have written that. In earlier approaches, what they used to write a JUnit test cases. What is JUnit means? Java unit testing, which means that is a first framework, and everybody use that in traditional way. Means whatever the piece of code we have written, that has to be entirely called in our JUnit test case, or you can copy paste that it here and run that with mock configuration, with mock data means some dummy data. But Spring Boot supports that not only JUnit, there is a powerful unit testing framework called Marketo that is rarely, very frequently used in the software companies. Everyone is, most of 90% of the companies suffer more than 90%. Most of them are using this Marketo framework. This is again a framework which help us to write the robust test cases. We have Power Marketo is there, Spy is there, that like that. Marketo provides a number of things to write our test cases. It is easy to write also. It helps us to mock our class, right? It helps us to test with the mock data without impacting the actual code. So, which means it gives us a very robust testing support also. You can test that using Spring Boot, right? There is Spring MVC annotation also, that you, with that approach also you can do unit testing. Means a number of frameworks it is support that, even REST API testing, REST assured testing, integration testing. You can do any kind of testing that Spring Boot supports. Next thing is production ready. Like that, what is production ready? In general, what we do that once we are done with the application development, we have to monitor that to see that health checks, matrices, and external configuration, and how the beans are creating, how the application is behaving. Spring Boot support. Spring Boot helps you to monitor all these parameters, configurations, matrices, and their health checks with the help of actuators. Actuators are the one which helps us to monitor your application. Let's see this many good. There are a number of other features also there which we discuss, and there will lengthy topic. In simple terms, you can say it is a powerful and a very popular framework that makes our development easily using Spring-based applications, and it provides very useful features. As these are the list of features, providing building a robust applications, production grade applications. Even security also there. Spring security is one of the most important topic. I frequently use that Spring security to secure our application, to secure your endpoints, to secure your data. So Spring security is most popular and become more popular. Everyone is using that security feature. So this all. Next, why do we use Spring Boot framework? We know that this is all the features that it is supporting. Here, the main concept is dependency injection approach in Spring Boot. What is the dependency injection? It is the way to inject your classes without our control. You no need to do that to create an object for that dependent object. Which means, right, for example, now you have a class X and a class B, class X referring the class B. Whenever any method you class from class B call from class X, right, class X to class Y, for example, you have to create an object to that class Y and then call that particular methods. But using this dependency injection, you just inject that during compile time only with the help of auto void annotation. You can inject the dependent classes. Which class you are depending on? X class depend on class B. Again, maybe class B again depend on some class A, C. Class C depend on some other class. So all these dependents you can inject during compile time only, which means whenever you deploy the application, then Spring identified all these components as the Spring container class, Spring objects, Spring beans. It automatically create Spring objects and checks any dependency injections are there. It automatically inject those dependent classes and make readily available. It makes some confusion for you. No worry, I will show you that what is that during hands-on. And it contains a powerful database management transaction capabilities. Also, what is that? In general, as we already seen in the previous sessions, to work with the database, you have to write a lot of stuff, right? Registering a drive, loading a driver, registering a driver, creating a connection, create a statements, and etc. doing, and then you are responsible to close the connection in proper way. And you are responsible to handle the exceptions, a particular exception properly. If we miss anything, right, the entire application get crashed. Spring Boot provides very rich features about this, powerful features about the database transaction management. What's those? You don't need to write any configuration related. You just give input details. What input details we already seen? The driver class, URL, username, port, and the database name you are going to connect. Because Spring Boot also wants to connect to that particular database, right? To which database you want to connect, it has to understand. So that is the reason for that you have to give a input details in the application.properties or YAML.properties, or you can read it from the external source, no matter. Using that input, it automatically have the implementation internally. When during startup, application startup, when you deploy the application, first step, it checks wherever you have the configuration as the right configuration, right? If first load all these configurations and look at first step is our application.properties. Right. If for suppose if you have configured the application.properties, your database details are there, then it read those details and inject those schema details to connection object. Internally, Spring Boot have that implementation to create, it lower the driver, it create a connection and be readily available for you. Whenever you start a transaction, for example, to insert the data into the database, to retrieve the data from the database, to update data or regard anything, any CRUD operation related, it automatically open a connection on fly and do a transaction in the current context and immediately close that connection object. If any some exception happen, for example, if you know syntax, select star from some XYZ table, there is no such table. Immediately it will identify and throw the exception to you and close the connection again. Or if you are trying to insert something, some partial data, it automatically take care that no data should be inserted partially. Okay, means it roll backs your data. It handle the exception and throw to the client and display to the end user. So like this, we have n number of powerful transaction management is there. If you see other transactional management is there, you can go Spring JDBC template, you can use in build Spring data GPU, you can use any other transaction management program. We can manage transaction, programmatic management, transaction management is there, declarative transaction management. You can play around with that, how You can one according to the requirement. And also it helps us to integrate with other Java frameworks like other ORM frameworks like either JPA, Hibernate, any ORM tool starts, anything. It have the capability to integrate with other frameworks with less configurations. Let's take an example of any ORM. What is ORM stands for? Object Relational Mapping. What we are doing in this object relational mapping? We are mapping our Java object to the relational database. That is called as object relational mapping, which means it is mapping our object to the relational database. So you no need to worry about how this is configured, how this has to work. You have to just say that create that classes and configure those annotations to connect to the database using JPA or Hibernate. So that makes you easy to communicate, to interact with the database. Okay. And finally, it helps us to reduce the costs and development time of the applications. How it is reducing that cost and development time means, see, everything Spring Boot, everything is doing a lot of stuff. Spring Boot, it comes with auto configuration with embedded server supporting a lot of other Java frameworks, right? And it has all these features. Because of this, you are spending less time and your productivity is too high. So this way it reduces the cost and development time of the application. But there are limitations are there. What limitation? That much every application, everything have a pros and cons are there, means advantages, disadvantages are there. What does this means? When you, if you want to work with the feature of just a web development and you don't want other support, when you add a dependency that as a web dependency, then it is loading a number of libraries that are required or may not require Spring Boot, context core, JDBC, etc., all these things. So with these dependencies increase the size of the application. So that's the only limitation that you cannot control because the way it structured that. But how these things are loading, I will show you that. Once you add the dependency, adding one dependency, it loading n number of libraries for us, to support our web applications. That I will show you, no worry in that. Now, what the goals of you Spring Boot? As we already discussed, to reduce the development time, to test unit testing, integration testing, so on, so on. We have more annotations than, and it eliminates, it avoids XML configurations, avoids a lot of importing of these import statements. Everything is annotation based only. Everything in the Spring Boot is annotation based only. With Spring Boot annotations, we can go ahead with our development activities. At last, now we have three different ways of creating a Spring Boot application. What is that? The first thing is using Spring Boot CLI tool. What is this CLI tool? This command line interface. CLI means command line interface. But that needs some software to download and do some configuration. That is not quite bit easy. It needs some time to do that. Other two approaches are very simple. Using STS. What is STS? Is Spring Tool Suite Integrated Development Environment. Like we have Eclipse, as we have heard about the Eclipses also. It is also a Eclipse, but Spring Suite tool. It comes with a Spring Boot dependencies by default. This is called as STS. And you can download this as a free of software. There is open source and free software only. And next is Initializer website. There is a Spring Initializer website. If you look at that, say Spring Start IO. You could say this one. Just click that one. You open the site start.spring.io is there. So here they provide the user interface, okay, to create our project with the required dependencies. You have to give a group ID, artifact, name, and description, everything. Now let's start. Anyway, we have opened this one. Let's start creating the project. And if you look at this project also, what type of project you want to create? Gradle, Kotlin, Groovy, or Maven. Now we go with the Maven and select the language. You are going with the Kotlin, Groovy, or Java. And which framework? Go switch to 2.7.19. Spring 3.8.x onwards, you have JDK 17 to be installed in your system. Spring 3.x onwards, they are restricting JDK 17. Okay, now .com. Okay, you just give the package, and the artifact is Spring application. Okay, this automatically take this package name automatically create with us, and demo description is demo project. Instead of that, you can give Spring application. Then we choose the JDK. What there's 20 is there, 17, 11. Now I choose 11. What you want to add is how to go with the dependencies. First thing is web. You see this. What is the web? Build web including RESTful application using SpringBoot. Uses Apache Tomcat as the default embedded container. I told you, right? This is servlet container, right? Servlet Tomcat container, it comes as an embedded. So this is how it is a part of this container. And Spring Reactive Web is the theme like web services, web sockets, add-ins, and REST repository, Spring session, everything is just a number of things related to web. And if you look at that security also, right? Spring security is there, auth to client, Octam, Spring LLM has a number of things. And if you think about that, JPA, Spring Data JPA, persist data in SQL stores with Java API. It means which helps us to write ORM related functionalities. Like that, we have a number of things are there. So there is a dev tools are there. Spring dev tools also. Spring dev tools, what it does, it provides fast application restart, which means every time when if you do a change in the application, you no need to restart your server explicitly. The moment you change, right? If there is a change in the application, in the code, this SpringBoot automatically instruct the server, instruct the Tomcat to live reloadly. Means there is a change. So there is some listeners they have implemented from the SpringBoot application to the server. If there is a change in the application and if you had the dependency added in your project, then event will be fired to the Tomcat. Say it instruct restart the server. So you know that way you save your time. But it is not always required that every time when you do a small change, to keep saving, click save, then keep reloading. So it is up to you. It is not mandatory to go ahead with that. Okay. Now you see this Spring configuration processors. What is this Spring configuration processor? As told you, right? If you want to read the configuration from the external source or property files, right? In production applications, what we do, you cannot have the application configurations within the application. You always 100% we are reading that configuration, we are accepting the configuration from the outside of the applications, outside of the file also. So that you go with the Spring configuration process. And Lombok is one of the Java annotation library that helps you to write a lot of boilerplate code. What is this lot of boilerplate code? Is when have a Pojo class. What you do that you are using that Pojo for any mapping purposes to map the data from one layer to another layer. For example, now to send the data from form data from the controller layer to the service layer to DO layer, because you are transferring the object to multiple layers, right? For that, you need to have those attributes, setter, getter methods, constructors, toString methods, etc., different type number of parameters of constructor like that. So if you want such stuff, then you have to write each and everything with this SpringBoot Java Lombok. You don't need to write that. You just define the annotation. You just give the instruction to create all argument constructor, no argument constructor, setter getters, anything. Why is how it helps is, suppose you have a constructor with all the arguments and you need a constructor with two argument constructor. What you do? Again, you have to create one more constructor for another set of arguments. Again, you have to create one more constructor. Right? That is one thing. Again, if you add a new field or if you change a new field or you drop a new field, something, if you change in the attributes, renaming and introducing something, then every time you have to regenerate all these things, right? So you don't need to do all this stuff, as it is called a boilerplate code. You don't need to do all these things. You just add those and instruct, leave it as this automatically take care. It will automatically generate set. It doesn't matter for the change in the properties or adding a new properties. So that we can say clearly during hands-on, no worry. So this is how we can choose. Now let's start with creating just only web and see this what is happening here. Then you select this one. Then right now I added only web. Now generate. What it is saying, then it create application for you, right? You just go show in folder. It is scanning for the antivirus. Okay, go to download folders. Then you could see here the Spring application. Then no, you just extract this here. See, if you extract, then you could see the structure, more complete structure of this, which means you have not created anything. Say everything, there is a tools that are available for us to do all this stuff. Now this you can directly import it here. Just say import in your STS and select Maven. What, you are not creating a new project, existing Maven project to into your workspace, and to go to the directory where that exists is there in our downloads folder and select that folder. So it will add automatically the pom.xml because everything is there in the pom.xml. It is a parent XML file where it holds all our dependencies required in our application. You see now it is, you could look what is going on here. Importing Maven projects. It is importing Maven projects means then it is downloading the dependencies required for a application, and it will be placed in some directory. If you go here in the C drive, by default it goes to that under your account users. This is the username that you have created to your system, configuring your system, and you could see there is a M2 Maven, and under that there is a repository folder. Then all these libraries are downloading it here as a part of Maven update. So this is what it is doing, update Maven project. Now I had added one web dependency. There are no other dependencies. These are all test dependencies that will automatically add for you to test, to write a test cases. So now you go here, what you could see here, see Maven dependencies. I have added just a web dependency. Then see how many things are loading: starter, web, starter, boot, auto configure, start lagging, backlog, classic, everything. It is your Tomcat. You see, I told there is embedded Tomcat. See, Tomcat embedded core is, all these are related to our Tomcat. And Spring Bean web, Beans web MVC, Spring AOP, Spring context, everything it gets loaded here. This called as a limitations. Means it is not necessarily loading all the libraries may or may not required. We may not all require all this stuff, all these libraries may be required minimum functions. What is that? If you need only Spring Core, then we don't want Spring Web. Then all these things are like, and you are not implementing any logging framework, then all these logging things are waste, right? And you don't want even Tomcat also. So these things, right? Like see, I told it Marketo also it is there. Marketo framework it supports that. You can test using Marketo also. Okay, right now we'll end up this session here, and that's the next session we'll start with another approaches, and I will repeat this same thing, and we'll do Spring CRUD operations in depth. Okay, as of now we'll stop here. Hello,
Sir.
any doubts?
No, sir.
Okay. Evening, you are done one more session. Okay, I will catch up then.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, sir.